changed the order of service today. We have something special. We want to recognize our Sacred Service teams, and I'm going to invite Lane Taylor to come up. We were going to do this at the Harvest, and we said, no, let's just do it on Sunday, because that way more people can get to see it. I do want to let you know a couple of things at the Harvest, if you weren't there. We created and gave out the first annual Virginia Nelson Award. That's for someone, yes. And that's for someone in our center that does great work out in the larger community, as Virginia did. And the first winner was Peggy O'Donnell, and I see Peggy back there. Wave, Peggy. And we did our two Volunteer of the Year Sacred Service Team Awards, and one went to Skip Bellier, who's in the booth back there for our live stream team, and the other went to Flo D'Agostanian, who just does everything. Thank you very much, Flo. And I want to mention that our own beloved Jerry Callendon, who's sitting right here, had a birthday on Friday. And I hear, correct me if I'm wrong, it's your 99th birthday? Is that correct? Well, congratulations. Happy birthday. I hope I look as good as you when I'm 99. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Lane, and we have some things to do here.
All right, thank you very much. And as Jim said, we were going to do this Friday night, and this might have been a little more fun after a few glasses of sangria. But nevertheless, although we're doing
well, you had an extra hour this morning if you
exactly.
wanted to have some.
And please know that that although we'll be trying to move through this quickly and in a lighthearted way, we are very serious about our gratitude for the work that the service teams do here at our center. So without further ado, and I just realized that many of our folks are actually in service at this moment and may not be able to make their way to the stage, but please, if you can, please do. I'd like to call up first, together, Scott Cochran, Skip Bellier, and Mary Steck.
I don't think they can all come up.
Mary can come up.
You guys stay in the booth.
All right, and I'm going to begin this as we're making our way up. Scott is the leader of our sound team, and we'd like to bestow upon him the giant microphone award. He's done an amazing job pulling this whole group together and supporting our team. Mary and Skip each deserve...
You can see we dip deep into our treasury for these for these gifts. We spared no expense.
Mary and Skip each deserve a medal. Mary manages our slide team back in the back. She makes sure that happens and that we have people doing that. And Skip is the leader of our video team, and as you heard, he was especially valuable to our community this year. Now, Mary, don't go away. Mary.
We're going to have you deliver these.
No. All right. I would like to. Our slide team is Jeff O'Donnell and Linda Legman, and they each. Oh, Jeff's doing slides. Please come
on up,
if
Jeff.
you're
This
available.
slide's staying here for a while, so come on up. Is Linda here? I don't think so.
All right. If you can bestow upon them the magic neon slide people bracelet. Are in. All right. Our video team each receives a special monocle because they are often looking with one eye at everything that goes on here. So our video team is Diane Hedrick, Ann Snyder, Greg Seymour, and Jesse Perez. And our sound team, if you can come to the stage, please do. Rob Thompson, Kevin Barnett, Costa Francitas, Steve Fowler, and Linda Legman. They each receive the magic purple wristband of honor. And what they should be receiving is a Purple Heart for being so patient with Andy and our sound team and our performers and everyone that they need to be patient with. Thank you very, very much. All right, you may all
over my podium.
I know. Just leave it here. Thank you. Round of applause for these very important things. The next group we'd like to recognize is our band. And you may not know this, but these gentlemen are all volunteers as well. And Andy's whipped them into a fine performing group. I would like to award each one of them a candy ear because they are giving us ear candy, right? I know they're kind of gross. Please give a hand for Steve Fowler, Rick Erickey, Randy Sloan, Saeed, and Johnny.
There you go. All right.
Thank you, gentlemen. Off
Thanks.
the stage.
Okay, have a seat.
You know, musicians, once you get them up, you can't ever get them to sit back down again. We would like to recognize our bookstore volunteers at this moment. Flo D'Agostanian, Saul Letzer, Kathy Burt, Barry Lipton, Evelyn Gertson,
Come on up.
Lillian Bird, and
No
Debbie
lollygagging.
Barecki. If you're in the room, please step forward. And please note, these are our previous year's volunteers, not necessarily the
Well.
ones that are in service today. And if I mention a team that you're
That's
on
okay,
and I
dear.
didn't call your name, just run up here anyway. We tried to get everyone. These ladies work tirelessly every Sunday selling new books.
These are nice. I'm gonna
Thank
wear
you
one.
very much. And our friendship table team. Diane Klimzak, Cindy Anders, Joyce Franzitas, and Yvette Weinberger. Please come up.
What are they getting?
They get magic headbands.
These are really
These ladies
nice.
are the face of our community every Sunday morning to those people. So we appreciate you and respect your work and are very
you go.
grateful for having you in our bookstore area. Thank you very much.
Ooh.
I would like now to bring up those folks who devote their time to our counting team every Sunday. They keep track of the money, and they are highly respected in our organization, and Dr. Jim is now going to pay them what they're worth.
And
Richard
we really
Garrity.
appreciate if you keep this team very busy.
Absolutely. Richard Garrity, Greg Seymour, Yasa Rasaku, Cheryl Glath, Jennifer Nigham,
Come on,
Karen
Yasa.
Newville, Mary DiVincenzo. Oh, and me.
And you. Thank you. Thank you. There you go. Boy, I love giving out money. All right.
Thank you very much to our accounting team. We'd like to acknowledge our youth volunteers. If you're here in the room, please come up. Tracy Adams, Alex Franzitas, Patty Justice, Dorianne Cotter-Lockard, Joyce Franzitas, and Peggy O'Donnell.
What are they getting?
They get some
Oh.
notes.
You have to put these on.
Oh, I guess that's it.
I'll take Dorian's.
All right. These very important teamwork with our youth. Please thank them every chance you get. All right. Would the following people please come to the stage? Gary Huttinger, Ron Young, Wally and Colleen Duncan, James and Adrian Stuvey.
Throwing stars?
These are ninja throwing stars for our service team leaders. These folks have led our very important service teams over the last 6 months. And if you caught one of those, you are now the next team leader for our service team. Thank you very much for
That's
your
how we
service.
recruit. That's how we recruit.
Oh, wait, you guys can stay up here. I was going to introduce your teams, but our first Sunday team led by Gary Hittinger, Brenda Cochran, Yvette Weinberger, Jennifer Nigham.
What
Yep,
are we giving
plastic
them?
lips.
Plastic lips.
It's our first Sunday team. Our second Sunday team, Diane Hedrick, Ann Snyder, Dominic and Nancy Cosentino, Frank Dickey, and Cindy Cosley.
What are we giving them?
This is the Red Clown Nose team. Because we appreciate and respect your very serious work.
Are these the clown noses?
Our third Sunday team, led by Wally and Colleen Duncan, Robin Galvez, Greg Blake, Maria Langford, Flo D'Agostanian and Karen Jones.
That's it.
This is the magic hot pink
Whoop,
team
excuse me.
because they are hot.
Y'all can trade among yourselves if you
And finally, our fourth Sunday service team, Andreas Adams, Kathy Burt. I think that's it. Oh, and my mom was part of that team, Edith Nielsen. Good morning.
Is Edith here? Okay.
There we go. I got a nose slot.
Oh, here. Hang on. I need one more nose.
I got noses. Please give these folks one more round of applause. And please, I hope you've noticed, as we've gone through this process, how very many people it takes to keep this organization running and how grateful we are. And before you get too far, I would like Andreas, Gary Hettinger, and Ron Young to please stay on the stage. These are our new team leaders for the period from October to April. I'm deputizing each one of you. Wally and Colleen, you can do that.
I can do this.
Wally and Colleen are spending their granddaughter's birthday.
There you go.
And there are still some opportunities on our service teams this coming period. So if you're inspired today to serve, please see one of these gentlemen. And we also need some folks on our technical teams. If any of you had added today's training to your calendar, we're going to postpone that until we have a few more folks to participate in that. But there is a place for you to serve. And I would like to thank these gentlemen and every one of you that we honored here today. You are a very important part of our community.
Stay here. And one more. This lady here has served above and beyond in a number of capacities, including coordinating all you people who are in the Sacred Service teams and providing. She's the one that prepares all the slides every week, and I can't even go into what else she does. She does the weekly updates. She does a ton of things here in deep, deep sacred service. So let's have a big round of applause. Could you give that to him? 'Cause I want to do that. Alrighty then. It's right here. I'm not going to do it. Oh, they already did that. Well, the shadow. This is something that keeps coming up over time, and Ken Wilber, who I really love his work, a philosopher and one of the leading modern philosophers, did a book called Integral Spirituality a few years back, and in that he talked about the concept of why is it so difficult for the traditional main religions of the West to modernize, to kind of help people understand their own psychological development and things like that. And one of the things he pointed to was that none of them really incorporate the concept of the shadow into their theology. That and in fact, our own teaching in many cases doesn't. Although Dr. Holmes did mention the concept of the shadow without calling it that, at least about 15 to 17 times in the textbook. And the shadow is simply the stuff that we repress. And we do this all the time. We do it as we're growing up. You started creating your shadow in the womb. And the shadow is simply when you're at any age really, but especially when you're young, you find that some aspect of yourself isn't acceptable. It's not loved and nurtured. People start saying no to you. And what we usually do at that point is we stuff that quality down within. We repress it. But that doesn't end it. When you stuff it down, it doesn't end. It stays deep in the subconscious, and it continues to work in every area of your life. The late Debbie Ford said, "The shadow contains all the parts of ourselves that we have tried to hide or deny. It contains those dark aspects that we believe are not acceptable to our families, friends, and most importantly, ourselves." So a lot of the stuff that gets repressed is what you might call antisocial behavior. You know, if you've ever observed 2 or 3-year-olds in a sandbox, there's a lot of antisocial behavior that goes on. You know, somebody wants a toy and they just take it away, or they bite each other or hit each other in the head or whatever it is. You know, and the parents have to kind of begin to socialize the kids so they're not doing that, right? But when in that socialization process, shadow gets built. The parts of themselves that they're not supposed to express get repressed. And by the way, some of the qualities that get repressed are very positive qualities. Maybe when you were a little child, it wasn't safe to be intelligent around your house. Maybe it wasn't safe to be happy or outgoing. So you stuff it. Now what happens is, there's a great quote by John Sanford, who was a Jungian psychologist, and he says, what happens is the stuff we bury in the basement early in our lives, for the rest of our lives, manages to tunnel out and pop up in the front yard. And the way this happens is through a process called projection. Now, projection is really, really an essential thing to understand in terms of psychology. And Carl Jung was really the one that sort of put all this together into Western psychology. Projection is where I have these repressed qualities and I project them out onto the world, and the world mirrors them back to me. My own stuff. But I don't know I'm projecting because it's subconscious. Therefore, I'm said to be in denial. So what I think is, when I get upset with someone else, like, you know, somebody wearing a silly thing on their ear, you know, and I could get upset with that, you know. I could say, would you please take that off your ear? You ever remember when you were a little kid in school and maybe the teacher would get upset at something, something you couldn't do, you knew you couldn't do it, right? And she or he might really get upset. I'll give you an example. Back in the old days in the federal penitentiary system, there was a dress code for the convicts, and the convicts had to button their top button on their shirts when they came out of their cells. They had to have their top button buttoned or they were in violation of the rules. So then you get in trouble for it. But if some convict really wanted to give a guard a hard time, before they came out of the cell, they just take their collar button and break it off and throw it away. And they'd come out with their collar open in flagrant violation of the rules, and the guard would say, "Button your button." And the convict would say, "Can't, lost it." And the guard would go, "Son of a bitch, what am I supposed to do?" You ever get upset at little stuff like that? That's projection. That's projection. It's not the noticing of the violation, it's the emotional reaction to it. That is really what the shadow is all about. We do it on the other side with adoration. When you see someone outside of yourself that you adore, that you fall in love. Matter of fact, falling in love is called an overload of projection. You fall in love with the people that mirror back your best qualities. You don't fall in love with the other person. You fall in love with the way they reflect you back to you. It's temporary, by the way. Because eventually, after a little while, they start mirroring all of your qualities back. And you wake up one morning and say, "I don't know who you are." And the correct response would be, "I'm all of you now." And we don't like that, right? So we have this process going on where we're continually projecting and denying. Just think, during the past week, have you gotten upset at anyone? By the way, they don't have to be a real person. They could be a fictitious character. You could be upset at a book you're reading or a TV show you're watching. I remember my grandmother used to get really upset at the people on TV. She had her stories she'd watch during the day, you know. And she'd say, "I just can't believe that he didn't say that," you know. I said, "It's a TV show, Nana," you know. But that she got totally involved in it. It was all her own projection. So you have that emotional response. Daryl Sharp, who's another Jungian, says, "I am not interested in fame and glory, but my rascal shadow is." See, the shadow is often that part of our ego structure that wants to be famous, you know, that seeks out attention, that, some people, you may know some people that have look at me issues. They want everyone to look at them, look at me, look at me, look at me. Now that's normal for a kid growing up. You get to that age, usually it's between about 6 and 9, where industriousness is coming into the process of child development. And that's, mommy, look at me, look what I did, look what I did. That's another place where shadow gets built, because mommy or daddy says, get away from me, I'm busy. You see, oh, you don't want to see what I did. See, so that gets repressed. Robert Bly says, by the time you're about in high school, he says, imagine every time you repress something, it's like taking off a piece of your soul and throwing it into a bag that you're carrying around. He said, by the time you're in high school, that bag is pretty full. He calls it the long bag we drag behind us. And the shadow building continues into adulthood. Do I fit in? Am I accepted in the workplace and socially and things like that? How do I have to change myself to be acceptable to those that I want to accept me? You see. And every time I do that, I repress an element of myself, positive or negative, and that element becomes unavailable to me consciously. James Hollis says, it's understandable why so few attempt shadow work, and shadow work is, by the way, the process of bringing this into conscious awareness. It's much easier to scapegoat others, blame, and feel superior to them. You know what scapegoating is? Scapegoating is when you blame someone else for something that really isn't their fault or their issue. And you might say, yeah, but the person I got upset at this week really is a jerk. They were arrogant. Maybe they did something horrible. See, and it's not that the shadow doesn't say, no, yeah, they may be a jerk. But what you're reacting to isn't their behavior. It's your projection onto them that they're just mirroring back. See, if we didn't have shadow, we would notice the stuff. We wouldn't necessarily get upset or angry or frustrated by it. Doesn't that suck? Isn't that awful? I mean, because usually when you're angry at someone, you really feel justified, right? They deserve. You might be angry at the guy that went into the airport and shot those people this week. You might be angry at whoever's responsible for the website for Obamacare. Or you might be angry at the people that are angry about Obamacare. Or you might be angry at the Dodgers for not getting into the World Series this year. Or you might be angry at the people you live with. Or the people who insist on driving on the roads you want to drive on. Or the people who get in front of you in the supermarket line. Just think of how often you find yourself having a little snit. Up to a big snit. How much of your energy goes into that kind of thing where you're emotionally upset, aggravated? You might just read a story and say, the whole world's going to hell. Here's a perfect example. Right? Now here's the news. None of that is anything but your own stuff. None of it. But isn't it happening? Yeah, it may be happening. But your reaction to it is all yours. Well, wouldn't anyone be upset? I don't know. Let's see. Could we think of someone that wouldn't be upset by getting cut off in traffic? How about the Dalai Lama? I usually use him as an example. He seems to be fairly shadow-free. Not completely. None of us are completely. But, I can't, if he's not getting upset at the Chinese for kicking his people out of Tibet and killing a bunch of them, I don't think he's going to get upset when somebody cuts you off and makes you a car length later to get to work. That cost me a whole car length. Right? Because when you think about it, the size of the things we get upset about, somebody gives you the wrong change. But sometimes it's really big stuff, Like your spouse slept with your best friend. Isn't that worth getting upset about? Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but understand the upset has nothing to do with what happened. The upset is the response of your own projection. Byron Katie had a quote on Twitter today. She said, "All of the problems you have with your spouse are your problems." So James Hollis says, what shadow work requires is growing up, maturity, and who wants to do that? By growing up, he means to look at, he means to look at things and recognize that when I feel these emotions of upset or anger or adoration, to just become aware, you know what, that's my signal that that's what's going on. I'm in projection. I'm in shadow right now. And then I can make a choice about what I want to do about that. But when I'm not aware that that's going on, I just get more and more and more into my projections. Most people are 90 to 95% in projection and responding to their projections all the time. There's almost no time when you're not doing that. Carl Jung said, we cannot become enlightened by looking only at the light. We become enlightened by bringing the darkness to consciousness, to conscious awareness, actually. And it's not easy. It's one of the hardest things to do, because as we begin to do shadow work, and many of you have taken the class I do, and I'm going to do that again soon, but we do the shadow class, and you'll see people just really in a crappy mood for about six of the 8 weeks. They're walking around and go, oh, God, it just keeps coming up, and it's awful. It is. It's painful to see what we've repressed. It's painful to see the parts of ourselves that we have set aside as inadequate. And you might say, well, isn't it a good idea to repress your negative qualities? And the answer is no, it isn't. It's a good idea to integrate them into your healthy self. It's not a good idea to live out of your shadow, only the one side of it. But it's also, see, the response we get is, on the other side of it is, people try to be perfect. When you grow up, you try to be really good all the time, you know? And this tends to affect women a little more than men, but that's our culture. That's not inherent in who we are. I've talked to so many women that as they were growing up felt the compulsion to be a good girl, whatever that meant, and feel really restricted and inhibited in how they live their life. Men do this too. It tends to show up in different areas of life. The man is supposed to, and this is changing, which is creating a lot of confusion. But I know when I was growing up, my dad would say, your job is to have a family and take care of that family even after you die. You should leave enough that they're taken care of. That's your job, and you should focus on that with all of your energy. Well, that's not fun. When you think about, oh my God, I'm responsible for this family not only now, but after I die. So that's how men sometimes process shadow. They become workaholic, or they become the opposite. They become a slacker, and they drop out of the system. But that's all shadow at work. What women tend to do is become sometimes very inhibited or very uninhibited. The two opposite ends of the pole, as opposed to a balance of both. Jung said, yet even our national mitigated state of war would come to an end if everybody could see his own shadow and begin the only struggle which is really worthwhile, the fight against the overwhelming power drive of our own shadow. Pretty much any conflict that exists is shadow. It's about projection. It's unconscious. And when we're in the middle of that projection, since it is unconscious, we're not aware. We just think we're seeing the world as it is. And we think that our emotional reactions are rational and reasonable because we're feeling them and we're not questioning them. It's hard to go to war if you're aware of your shadow, because you have to stop saying, it's not me, it's you, and start saying, it's not you, it's me. And who wants to do that, really, you know? It's more fun to cast the blame. Years ago, Louise Hay said, blame is always off the track. Blame is always off the track. And that's what she was talking about. Now, does that mean we don't hold people accountable for wrong action? No, that's not the same thing. Society has a right to protect itself from deviant behavior. But can we do that without projecting all the emotional load onto it? Is another question. And the emotional load comes out of our own shadow projections. And you can tell where the national shadow is by what crimes get the highest punishments. What crimes do people really get upset about? What actions really enrage people? You know, upset people. What kind of topics can't you bring up in certain company? Because when we just don't like the projection, we don't like the feeling of it. We don't like feeling bad, so we try to control the behavior of the others so that we won't have to see it. That's why people move to better neighborhoods. If you're rich enough, you can build a fortress around yourself so you won't have to be disturbed by things you see. You see? I saw that when I used to work, when I was in the police department, I used to work all the Miami Dolphin games at the stadium there. And when they built that stadium, and when they moved out of the Orange Bowl and built the new stadium, that was when they were beginning to do the sky boxes and the club seats. And all the cops wanted to work in that area because nothing ever happened. You know, they were people that were wealthy enough to get away from the unwashed masses below who were all drunk and fighting. See? So you go up in the skybox to be protected, and the skybox even had glass you could close, you know, if it got too disturbing. And you could even watch the game. You didn't have to look at the field. You could watch the game on TV. You could just do it. But there is that sense of, let me get away from it. And if I can afford to, let me just protect myself from this world that upsets me so much. It's kind of an interesting response. So when we do shadow work, the process of doing shadow work is first becoming aware when I'm in this emotional state of reaction that I'm saying, whoa, okay, this is me, I'm projecting. And it's not that what I'm seeing isn't wrong or evil or illegal, but it's that I'm in an emotional projection state which is causing my emotional and physiological reaction to this, and is this the reaction I would choose to have? And I have to own that that's what I'm doing. And then if I want to really look at what have I repressed in myself that has led me to this reaction so that I can bring it back into awareness and integrate it. And the example I use in the class, if you remember the TV show MASH or the movie MASH, there was the character, there were a couple interesting shadow characters in there. One was Frank Burns, the captain that was having the affair with Hot Lips Houlihan. Remember that? Yeah. Remember Frank? And Frank was very, very rigid. Right? He wouldn't let anybody violate the rules, and he always wanted to be in command so he could get everybody shaped up. See, that's a sign of people with very, very strong shadows usually don't have a sense of humor. Because nothing's funny, nobody cares, nobody's taking anything seriously around here. I'm the only one that can get this ship going in the right direction. And I'm really glad you put me in charge. We're going to put in some serious rules around here. No more slurping your soup around here. And there won't be any wearing clown noses on your ears. See, that was Frank Burns, and when he would get in charge, he'd make everybody be strictly by the book military. But see, when you have that heavy shadow, you got to have an outlet. So Frank, what's the deal with you and the affair with Hot Lips? Oh, well, there's nothing going on there, you know. See? And then you had Radar O'Reilly, the company clerk. Now, Radar would bend the rules. You know, he was an acquirer. If they needed something for the hospital, he'd get on the phone with the other company clerks and swap stuff, you know, which was probably mostly against regulations. But he was doing that to get things for the people in the hospital. So he had integrated his inner thief. When you integrate your inner thief, you become good at acquiring things, but you're not doing it for yourself. There was another guy that worked in the motor pool that was sending a Jeep home part by part, so that when he got out of the Army, he could sell that Jeep and make money, right? Remember that character? Now that's a guy that's stuck in the negative part of the shadow. He's doing it for himself. He hasn't integrated it into a healthy self. Radar has integrated his thief, which probably got repressed in childhood, because most of the time our thief gets repressed in childhood. Doesn't mean we don't steal things, it means we don't think of ourselves as a thief. So he had integrated that in, and he became incredibly effective in a selfless way. See? Whereas Frank Burns, if Frank Burns had caught him doing that, he'd write him up and put him in prison. See? So that's how those shadow energies interact. And when people are very rigid and very, kind of stuck in their ways and very, always concerned that something's going to go wrong, or convinced that everything's going wrong all the time, then that overload of projection goes out onto everyone around them. And you're not very fun to be around. And sometimes people with these real heavy shadows seek leadership positions because they know that's the only way everything will get worked out. And when they become the leader, boy, does everybody suffer. It's kind of interesting. So the good news, bad news. The good news is you can do something about your shadow. The bad news is you'll never eliminate it. It never goes away completely. But by making more and more of it conscious, you can decide, you know what, do I really want to be upset every time I drive into LA, if I drive into LA more than once in a lifetime? Well, I can do something about that. And first I need to recognize that it's my own stuff that's causing my reaction. It's not what the others are doing. Unless you learn to face your own shadows, you will continue to see them in others because the world outside is only a reflection of the world inside you. It's all done with mirrors. Everything and everyone in your life is mirroring back to you what you're projecting. And you know what? The interesting thing is that's the only thing you can perceive is what you're projecting. I'll give you an example of that. You ever known, you're going to have to think of like in three people here. There's three people, okay? Person A, person B, person C. A and B both know C. And they have completely different opinions of C and their character and whether or not they want to hang around with them or not. One that just thinks they're great, the other one can't stand them. How can that happen if we're being objective? Well, the usual response to that is, I'm A, I'm being objective. B obviously isn't. B is obviously biased, or they would agree with me. And poor C doesn't know what the hell's going on, right? But the reality is that A and B are simply projecting different qualities onto C, which C is faithfully mirroring back. And that's all you can see. That's all you will see until you decide to become more conscious about it. Abraham Lincoln said one time, if you don't like someone, it's probably because you don't know them well enough. And somebody else said, if you think someone's normal, it's because you don't know them well enough. They're both true, by the way. They're both true. We only see a slice of the other person and what they're projecting out into the world because we can only perceive what they're mirroring back to us from ourselves. And don't worry, it's the same with them and you. I don't understand it. The person just doesn't see my best qualities. No, because they're not projecting their best qualities to you. What can I do about that? I don't know. Be okay with it. So this week, here's your homework. Just kind of pay attention. Notice and here's the two emotions that aren't shadow, by the way. Happiness and sadness. Happiness and sadness tend to be the only two genuine emotions. Everything else is projection. So it's perfectly appropriate to be very saddened by what happened at LAX the other day. If you're really angry and pissed off, that's shadow. Now, the culture at large will say that's appropriate. So our culture accepts shadow as normal because they don't understand it. You may find a lot of agreement with you being upset at stuff. But understand that the people that are agreeing with you are as unaware of their projections as you are of yours. And by the way, that's who we tend to hang with, the people who agree with us. Have you noticed? Why do you think that is? Well, see what's going on in any such situation. You're walking up. When you came in here for the first time, you kind of walked around. You had you're projecting, and you're getting stuff mirrored back according to the culture that's here. And it must have felt good because you stayed. Some of you are saying, well, they're not staying now, but that's all right. Whereas you might go into another spiritual community and have a very different experience because your projections are mirrored back from their consciousness in a different way. They mirror back different qualities of you than we do. And it seems very confusing, but it really isn't. It's just a different way of looking at it. We've been conditioned to look at it as I'm here, you're there, and I'm a rational being, and you're questionable. And the reality is we're all questionable. And that's where we have to begin. So running from the shadow is really something that we do unconsciously. We do it by not being willing, A, to be aware of it, and B, to do the work. And the ultimate work of shadow, see, the ultimate recognition of shadow is part of the mechanism of wholeness that you possess as a human being. The shadow process is to help you to heal. But we have to learn where are the points I need to become aware. Because when I become aware that my emotion I'm feeling is because of my projections, I have an opportunity to heal it. And what the shadow really is a mechanism to recover all of that stuff that's been repressed and bring it back into awareness as a mature adult when you're able to deal with it and integrate it into a healthy self. Because the inner thief you might have left behind at 6 or 7 years old might be essential to your happiness now. It's embracing the entire self. That there isn't any part of me that isn't good if it's integrated into a healthy consciousness. There's nothing about me that I need to be ashamed of. That I have the capacity within me for anything a human being can do. I could be the worst mass murderer in history, or I could be the greatest spiritual teacher in history. And I have those capacities within me. And to deny that is to deny reality. And when we deny reality, we lose. So I'll be honest with you, maybe not my first, but my second or third thought for that gunman was compassion. What drove him to that? And then you find out he's the little guy that got picked on. See? Bullied. Why do we bully? We bully because we're projecting. We bully because we don't understand what's going on. We bully because differences make us afraid. And yeah, he needs to be in custody. He needs to be out of the system in terms of where he can't hurt other people until he gets healthy. But to see him as evil and say that explains it, that doesn't serve anyone. And that's the kind of thing that maturity calls upon us to do. We need to be way more culturally mature in this culture. way more willing to own our own stuff and not blame others for our condition. And we're getting there. One of these lifetimes, it'll happen. So your homework again is pay attention this week. Bring it to consciousness, and even if it's uncomfortable. If you don't like what you're feeling and you're afraid to look at it anyway. The subconscious decision you made to repress something at 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 17 or 27, if you bring that back up now, you're a different person. You can handle it. You can make better choices. You can know your own strength and do the spiritual practices that support you in that. That's what it's about. Thank you, and namaste.